Welcome back. What's behind the increase in bomb threats at Jewish community centers and arson fires at mosques around the country, including in our own area? Since the beginning of the year, there have been more than 160 bomb threats at Jewish community centers around the country, including here on the Suncoast. We have also seen vandalism and graffiti at synagogues and arson fires at mosques, including one in New Tampa just a few weeks ago. Some blame President Trump for being slow to condemn white supremacy groups and his flagrant rhetoric about Islamic extremism. But is there more going on, and what should be done to keep our Jewish and Muslim communities safe? Joining us for more on tonight's topic is Captain John Walsh, who oversees the Investigations Bureau at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, Hassan Shibly, Chief Executive Officer at Florida's Center for American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, and joining us by Skype from Paris, France, where he is taking part in an international conference on anti-Semitism, is the Rabbi Emeritus Jeff Hunting of Sarasota's Temple Sinai. And Rabbi, let me start with you. What is this conference all about, and what are they saying in terms of why now? What's causing this uptick in anti-Semitism?
The conference is really it's a small conference. It's sponsored by the American Cathedral here in Paris, and was arranged by their pastor, Lucinda Laird, who is a friend of mine, and I will share the pulpit with Rabbi Tom Cohn, who is the conservative rabbi here in Paris. Primarily, it's about anti-Semitism in both countries, both in France and in the United States. And there is a contrast in the two. So it should be very, very interesting to kind of flesh that out.
Well, when we're talking about the anti-Semitism that we're seeing here at home, I mean, some people have blamed it on the presidential campaign, and as we said in the intro, perhaps President Trump did not knock down some of these extremists quick enough. Do you agree with that, or are you seeing something else?
I think that's really hard to say, but and I don't mean to sidestep that, because I don't think that Donald Trump created the situation right now. In other words, I think these groups were operating. What I do believe, and is you cannot separate the threats to the Jewish community from threats to the Muslim community in the United States and in Sarasota, because what we have seen is a marginalization of what I would call the other, whether you're Jews or whether you're Muslims, groups that some people in the United States don't really believe are really Americans and that we're really foreign. And I think this was, if it wasn't created, I believe it was exacerbated by the campaign.
Well, Hassan, and Hassan, let me ask you this. Was there an uptick because of the campaign, or really does it go back to 9/11 or even before that?
Well, there has been a tremendous increase over the last year in anti-Muslim hate crimes, and we actually pinpointed it starting at the time when Donald Trump started saying that he wants to ban Muslims, that he thinks Islam hates us, that he thinks Muslims should have special registries and mosques should be spied on. Unfortunately, that's led to an over 500% increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes and hate incidents in the state of Florida. And unfortunately, we're also seeing an uptick in anti-Semitic hate attacks and attacks against Jewish cemeteries, Jewish houses of worship, which really shows, as the good rabbi said, that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are linked together, and we have to challenge it together. And the silver lining to all of this is I do believe it's brought the Muslim and Jewish community stronger together.
And we did, because actually my rabbi at my synagogue went to that mosque and held services and a joint service with the Muslim community right after that fire in New Tampa. Captain, let me ask you this. How busy has it gotten for the Sheriff's Office in terms of threats that are coming in and intelligence coming in that these things are happening around our community?
I think we've been pretty fortunate that we haven't experienced those things, and I would credit that to our relationships with Muslims and Jewish communities and our partners. We've always, for years, had a dialogue, and it's been two-way. You know, it's not been a singular avenue. We've always talked to each other.
When you mean dialogue, is it basically asking both the Jewish and Muslim communities if you receive, if not an overt threatening language or calls to report that immediately?
Yeah, anything that they need, we're responsive to anywhere in the community. But yeah, they know anybody in Sarasota County has a means to contact us about what they hear or see. And they've always been good about that, every community within Sarasota County.
And in our next segment, I want to get into some of the technology out there and the federal funds that are available to religious organizations to monitor their facilities. But Hassan, we only have a minute left here. How often do you hear in our area threats coming into a mosque or a community center that you have to respond to?
It's happening very, very frequently, unfortunately. Almost every month we hear about a different mosque being burnt down or somebody calling a mosque and threatening to shoot up the children and blow it up. So there is an increase in hate crimes, but there's also a tremendous increase in shows of solidarity from our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Christian brothers and sisters in law enforcement, people of all different religions, atheists, Hindus, Sikhs, coming together to say we will not let America be a nation of hate. We will stand together because an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Okay, we are just getting started with our discussion. It will continue right after we check on the weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing threats and hate crimes against Jews and Muslims, including in our own area. Our guests tonight are Captain John Walsh of the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, Hassan Shibly of Florida's Center for American Islamic Relations, and joining us by Skype from Paris is Rabbi Emeritus Jeff Hunting of Sarasota's Temple Sinai. And Rabbi, let me start again with you. When you were at Temple Sinai, what did you and the synagogue do in order to take advantage of programs run by the federal government to add surveillance cameras and use technology to make sure that the synagogue and your congregants were safe?
We actually, our building is relatively new. It was completed just 11 years ago. And so at the time, it was really the first post 9/11 synagogue building in Sarasota. So we had the benefit of the FBI, who advised us as to the security necessary. Having said that, this era now has raised our concern, and there are many in our congregation who believe that our security is inadequate, and so we're studying that right now. But because of the way the synagogue was developed, it was relatively recently, this building, we did have that benefit where other synagogues did not.
Captain, do you find that synagogues and mosques and churches around here are adequately protected in terms of use of cameras and technology? I do know that on Shabbat, many times there is a sheriff's deputy that is there. I would imagine it's the same at mosques and churches. Is it enough?
Well, I think the level of protection is up to the people who run the, individual locations, and you have to be satisfied and explain that to the people who would go to your synagogue or mosque, why or why not you have certain mechanisms in place to prevent, acts of violence. But locally, because of our communication and ability to communicate, we always have extra, protection, security, and especially if there's any heightened thing globally or locally.
And Hassan, what precautions do you take? Do you have somebody watching the back door?
Right. Well, at CAIR-Florida, we do offer a free safety and security training that we make available to all houses of worship and community centers, including synagogues, churches, mosques, and other temples. And we do encourage people to have basic security measures like having a greeter there, welcome everybody, having multiple exit points, but only one entrance point, and other basic safety and security trainings, including having active shooter trainings. God forbid that's a worst case scenario. We hope it never ever happens, but it's important people be prepared, because in America, unfortunately, you have more mass shootings in a year than you have days in a year with all the problems that we're dealing with. So it's important that we work together to be prepared, and we're offering that training to everybody.
Captain, it's impossible to generalize, but when these things do happen and threats are called in, does the Sheriff's Office investigate it? Does it go to federal authorities? How often do you find who's responsible for it?
Yeah, we constantly are in contact with the FBI, the Secret Service, Homeland Security. We have personal contacts that we talk to frequently, usually once a week, for various things, not just this subject, but their services and equipment are always available to us.
Rabbi, where do you see this going? I mean, we're at a time in our nation's history where we are very polarized. Politics is largely responsible for it. You know, how do we get past where we are right now in the short term?
Well, I think first of all, we have to understand what it is. We have to define it. In other words, it's not the 1930s, thank goodness. It is not anywhere near the situation here in this country, which I love, in France. And so we have to count our blessings in a certain sense. However, on the other side, I believe it's a quote attributed to Albert Einstein, who said that beware of the beginnings when he was talking about the 1930s that were ignored. And the good news is that none of our communities are ignoring the beginnings, if they are beginnings of something worse. The fact that we're cooperating is with the other communities, especially the Muslim community, is a wonderful thing. And Hassan is right; it is a silver lining.
But
where do I think it's? We don't know. We don't know.
You know, you said that it's not as acute or bad as it is in France, but where you are, right now, there is a huge increase in anti-Semitism and anti-Islamophobia there, and I would imagine that both of you would be concerned that what is happening in Europe does not, you know, come back to the U.S. to the same degree.
Yes, France has the largest Muslim population and the largest Jewish population in Europe. And up until now, it's a very different situation here. There's been hostility mostly from one community against the other, mostly because of the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Tens of thousands of Jews here in France have been forced to move from their neighborhoods to other safer parts of Paris and France. And we don't have that in the United States, thank goodness. So I think in that regard, I think it's more of a contrast than a comparison. Having said that, I think it's would be very unwise to underestimate what's happening. Clearly these groups are coming out and we are under threat. And so we'll respond to the threats as they come.
Hassan, what can the local Muslim community do? Because, you know, it's not just the new administration and the campaign that we just went through. Since 9/11, and with the concern about terrorism, both what we see overseas and coming to our shores, the Muslim community has had a difficult time more than any other community in many ways in terms of saying that we are Americans, patriots, and we're not the enemy.
Well, I think it's important for people to recognize that Islamophobia is worse today than it was in the days after 9/11. After 9/11, about 40% of Americans had a negative image of Islam. Today, it's well over 50%. In fact, over 50% of Americans polled who don't know any Muslims said they would support forcing Muslims to wear special ID cards. And we know what the last group that was forced to wear special ID cards was the Jewish community. In fact, a good friend of mine, Rabbi Shapiro, said that what's being said about Muslims today is the same as what was being said about Jews in Germany 70 years ago. So it's the same hatred, and we have to tackle it together. And it isn't connected. The University of Georgetown has done a study that's shown that Islamophobia is not connected to bad things done by Muslims, because you have bad people in every religion that have done horrible things in the name of its religion. Rather, Islamophobia is connected to politicians who don't have real solutions to the real problems plaguing this country, scapegoating minority communities, and the over $200 million that have been spent to demonize Muslims in America.
We have less than a minute left. Captain, you can't get into the politics of it all, but what can the Sheriff's Office and local law enforcement do to make Jews, Muslims, Christians feel safer in their houses of worship?
I think continue to do what we've always been doing and continue the dialogue. We're at the table constantly. We talk to each other. I learned something earlier before we started this thing that I had no idea about.
What was that?
And I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
But it was good. It was good information. We don't know what we don't know, you know, and to continue that dialogue. I mean, we'll live in the quality of life we have here in Sarasota County.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about President Trump's first 2 months in office. So stay with us. Welcome back. What's behind the rise in threats and hate crimes against the Jews and Muslim communities, and what can be done to stop it? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Rabbi, let me start with you. I mean, this is what you're talking about in Paris right now. What do you hope to get out of this conference, and what do you want our viewers to take about where we are right now?
Well, first of all, I want to be educated about the situation here in France from people who are experiencing it firsthand, and as well as to share what's happening in the United States. And but one of the things that in this country, virtually every politician has spoken out against anti-Semitism, which is very commendable. Well, there's a presidential election coming up in next month, the first round, and they from right to left they have denounced anti-Semitism. I'd like to see that happen in the United States even more than it's happening. I hope that our leaders on both sides will take these threats against not just the Jewish community but the Muslim community as well as serious and deserving of comment.
And Captain, I would imagine it's a fairly new thing for people, whether they're going to the synagogue or to the mosque, to have to be aware of what's happening outside the front door.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part, is on whatever day of worship you choose, that now you have to be constantly aware of a threat. You don't have that peace you used to have or thought you had. And so, but I think we're doing a good job at normalizing a lot of that and working with the different organizations.
And Hassan, I've noticed that the Muslim community is doing more in terms of outreach to the greater community, not just the Jewish community, but the greater community. Are you hoping these are seeds that will sprout in the near future?
Well, I'm hoping these challenging times will push the community, the Muslim community, to continue to work to serve its neighbors. And through service, we build strong relationships. And our message is that our enemies can never destroy us as Americans. We can only destroy ourselves if we allow fear and hate to turn us against each other and be willing to undermine principles of liberty and justice that make America great. And I think we got to work together to keep America a great nation where children of all people, regardless of their race or religion, can grow proud of who they are without fear of intimidation or harassment.
We'll have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about Friday's topic, the latest week of President Trump's first 2 months in office. The White House continues to defend the unsubstantiated claim President Obama wiretapped Donald Trump. Multiple federal judges halted the new version of the travel ban. President Trump also released his budget plan, which amps up military spending and slashes funding for domestic programs like Meals on Wheels. We asked you what you thought about the week in Washington. Shannon Zelinsky writes, eventually all the lies, diversions, and deceptions are going to catch up with him, and us snowflakes will be vindicated. We saw him for who he truly is, a charlatan of humongous proportions. Beverly Nelson writes, he is doing a great job cleaning up Obama's mess. Can't be an easy task. And Janice Notman writes, God bless our neighbors in the USA. Happy to be a Canadian. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news7. And want to watch past roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Captain John Walsh oversees the Investigations Bureau at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. Hassan Shibly is the Chief Executive Officer at the Florida Center for American Islamic Relations. And Jeff Hunting is Rabbi Emeritus at Temple Sinai in Sarasota. He joined us tonight by Skype from Paris.